Good evening and welcome to The Jury, the show where you, the people of Australia, sit in judgment on the issues confronting the nation. Coming up on tonight's show, Albo is coming after the car you drive. That's right, the Aussie ute is in the PM's firing line as Labor's electric vehicle crusade sets its sights on reducing climate emissions. Calls for Chinese-owned app TikTok to be banned over national security concerns, but the PM's not budging. Barnaby Joyce will fire up on why he thinks we are too soft on China. Meanwhile, with youth crime at crisis levels, we ask, should parents be held responsible for the crimes of their children? This week, a Labor visa bungle saw arrested immigration detainees walk free. Are our borders weaker under Labor? Plus, that now infamous photo of Princess Kate. There they are, this week's jury, ready to weigh up the arguments and deliver their verdict. Before they do, we'll hear from expert witnesses and some of your favourite Sky News contributors. The courtroom is now in session. Let's get into it.
Sky News Australia presents The Jury with Danica De Giorgio.
Well, the next federal election is shaping up to be a ute tax election as the fight over Labor's emission reduction plan for cars and utes shifts into top gear. Manufacturers will face fines unless they lower the carbon intensity of their fleets by more than 60% by the end of the decade. It's been touted as Labor's great climate change market intervention, though the PM insists petrol cars are not being banned. The Federal Chamber of Automotive Industries warns the proposed emissions standard will push up the price of popular models like the Ford Raptor by $6,000 and some other models by $25,000. Already, Australia's three most popular vehicles sold in 2023 all emit 194 grams of carbon per kilometre on average, meaning the Ford Ranger, Toyota Hilux and Isuzu D-Max are under threat under Albo and Bowen's blueprint. Our first question for the jury: is the government trying to kill off utes? Joining us now is Liberal Senator Holly Hughes, former Assistant Shadow Minister for Climate Change and Energy, plus Tim Buckley, Director of Climate, Energy, Finance. Thank you so much to both of you for joining us on the panel. Holly, we'll start with you. Is the great Aussie ute about to become a thing of the past?
This is an absolute tax grab by this government. I mean, yet again we see Casanova Bowen racing too hard and too fast here in a bid to chase this emissions target that he's consistently just setting for himself. It's 6 years that we're looking till they want this 60% standard to be put into place. It is going to push up the cost. Australia itself is a very unique market, yet Bowen seems to have no comprehension of this. We've got a generation of kids who apparently have climate change anxiety. What Bowen is doing is setting up the Australian family and the Australian tradie to go into range anxiety. We know that there's not enough options when it comes to charging, but we also know that there are not enough options when it comes to SUVs and utes in these electric vehicles. They just simply don't exist. The few that do exist are left-hand drive and cost over $100,000.
Wow.
So what does this mean? It means that Australian tradies and Australian families are going to keep what they've got for longer. That's going to lead to higher emissions, and it is absolutely a bid to tax the ute out of existence.
I mean, this is quite a big plan by the government, Tim, that's been handed down. I mean, surely you've got to concede they're coming after the ute.
I absolutely categorically reject that conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
This is, we've had an absolute misinformation campaign from the opposition, the federal opposition, and unfortunately tonight we've just heard that yet again, that it's a tax. There is no tax involved. It is not a new tax. We've had ABC Fact Check and ABC Checkmate categorically say that there is no new tax and that the statements of the LNP are categorically wrong. There are a number of reasons why this is very, very sensible strategy to drag Australia into the current century. Mm-hmm. Our emissions standards are some of the worst in the world. India, China, Europe, America all have emission standards. It's about time Australia joined the rest, 85% of the rest of the world, and actually have some standards, some emissions controls on our vehicles. So apart from the misinformation campaign, to me, electric vehicles are brilliant. We import in Australia $60 billion a year of oil and diesel. That is a massive energy security risk for our country. It's a massive economic headwind for our economy. And so to me, I'd much rather use domestic, cheap and clean energy to fuel our vehicles.
Does he raise a good point here that we risk being left behind if we don't go down this pathway, Holly?
Absolutely not. And I mean, it's good to see, Tim, you reading the Labor talking points on this fuel efficiency standard. The Coalition's actually not opposed to a fuel efficiency standard. We are opposed to what Bowen is trying to introduce because, again, it's too fast, it's too hard, and we don't have the infrastructure.
85% of the world already has standards. We're the laggard.
Not this harsh.
We're not
and 4,000 dealers in the US, over 50 states, have just written to Biden and said, you've got to put the handbrake on this. We are not those markets. China emits 29% of the world emissions. We emit 1%. Of our emissions, transport is 19%, cars are 45%. It is a minuscule amount of our emissions on the global stage, yet we are going to be punished. We have a completely different environment to any of those countries that we're being compared to in the distances that we drive and the way that the Australian economy operates.
Greater fuel efficiency standards will benefit
an absolute furphy that this is a cost of living measure. It is going to cost Australians more. Every single one of these cars. There aren't enough chargers. The infrastructure is 60,000 to 100,000 per fast charger. They do not exist yet. No one is saying we are not going to ultimately get there. We are not going to get there at the pace Bowen wants us to.
Tim, I mean, you talk about the regions, but if we look at farmers, for example, they particularly rely on utes. And as I mentioned in the introduction, Ford Ranger, Toyota Hilux, Isuzu D-Max, they're all under threat because of this new policy. The farmers in particular, the tradies, what about them? Do you think that that is going to have an impact?
They're not under threat because what this will do is encourage the supply of new vehicles into Australia. All of those vehicles will still be available and it'll be about increasing the range, the alternative choices that consumers have.
I mean, basic economics tells you that's wrong. We are 1% of the global car market. We are a right-hand market. We are a small market. Isuzu does not have a vehicle that it can put in place. And it's not the Coalition putting out any misinformation. It is all of the automotive industry groups.
Let's go
and
to
the
only
two that have left, Tesla and Polestar, because they're going to make all the money from the new tax when they're having to buy the